So, on that note, let's get into the fun part. Let's dive into the very first session of the day. We're going to set the stage with a broad look at the biggest demographic shifts of our time. How do these changes reshape our labour markets, our talent, and our workforce for the years ahead? And with that, I have the wonderful pleasure of welcoming to the stage the Chairman, Global Longevity Council at the World Demographic and Ageing Forum, Dr. Pol Vandenbroucke. Please give him the warmest of welcomes.
Almost lost my mic to start with, so very good. Good morning, and thank you very much for the introduction, and also thank you for the invitation to speak this morning. It's a pleasure to address an issue that has been unfolding for decades, but that has only recently entered public debate and has profound consequences, especially for labor markets. Just by coincidence, Paul Ehrlich, the American biologist, died a few weeks ago. And he's best known for his 1968 book, The Population Bomb, which warned that overpopulation would trigger mass starvation within decades. It inspired the one-child policy in China and also some of the sterilization campaigns in India under Indira Gandhi. In 1968, that fear sounded plausible. Since the end of the plague, the world population had risen from about 350 million in the 14th century to 3.5 billion in 1968. Yet none of his predictions came to pass. There was no famine. Instead, we are now also witnessing something very different. The world's population is expected to peak later this century and then enter a sustained decline, possibly as early as the 2050s. So historically, population decline came from shocks, war, plague, famine, disasters, often intense, but always episodic. Today is different. The 21st century decline is driven primarily by low birth rates. It is global in scope and likely to persist for decades. That combination of cause, scale, and duration makes it unprecedented and consequential. We are entering a new age of depopulation. Indeed, this shift raises hard questions. What demographic futures look like across different regions? What geopolitical, economic, and social consequences follow, and how societies and economic actors prepare for a world that is both smaller and older. So what's happening and what are the drivers? Population change is very simple. It rests on a demographic trinity of number of births, number of deaths, and the effect of migration. People will always have children, declared Konrad Adenauer in the late 1950s, when Germany was experiencing a post-war baby boom. However, his remark has not held true over time. Around the world, births have fallen, and at different speeds in different continents. But today, nearly 80%, 80, of the world's population now lives in countries with below replacement birth rates. So the number of births needed to maintain the population is not reached in 80% of the world's population. 2023 was likely the first year the global fertility rate fell below replacement. And even Africa's fertility rate has declined steadily since the 1980s, though it remains above replacement. Fertility rates have also fallen faster than many projections. Sophia mentioned the 10 billion figure, but the UN low variant now forecasts a global population peak of about 9 billion by 2054, down from a projection of 11 billion only a decade ago. Many large economies have entered or will soon enter sustained population decline. Japan, of course, but also Italy, China, South Korea, Germany, and Spain. Having children today begins not with biology, but with human agency. Childbearing used to be a social default, but now having children has become something people actively choose. It is an opt-in life stage. That represents a profound cultural transition where human volition is central. And the strongest predictor of national fertility is women's desired number of children, albeit with some structural constraints such as housing affordability and childcare costs. A powerful explanatory factor for what is happening is girls' education. Where secondary education expands, agency and health improve, and desired family size typically falls. Where it remains limited, early and high fertility persists. A second shift is postponement. In most advanced economies, the typical age of childbirth has moved into the early 30s, often reducing the completed family size due to biological constraints, even when intentions are higher. Alongside falling birth rates, also life expectancy has risen sharply. Since the mid-1990s, global life expectancy increased by nearly a decade, and since 1950s by almost 30 years. Longer lives act as a demographic buffer. Outside Africa, most population growth in the next 3 decades comes from older age groups, but the buffer is finite. If low fertility persists, deaths eventually exceed births. So longevity slows depopulation, but it does not reverse it. And unlike fertility and mortality, unlike births and deaths, migration redistributes population rather than creating or ending life. In many low fertility countries, immigration has actually become the primary source of population growth. It also sustains essential services. Here in Switzerland, for instance, about 38% of the medical workforce were trained abroad. But migration is not a permanent solution from a demographic perspective. Migrants age, and their birth rates tend to convert towards that of the host country over time. It's also geographically zero-sum. Gains in destination countries can deepen problems in sending countries, especially those which have already low fertility rates, by removing reproductive age adults and shrinking future cohorts. So what are the potential consequences? Well, the main impact, of course, is economic. Modern economies were built on an implicit assumption of population growth. Depopulation challenges that foundation by reducing the number of workers, but also the number of consumers, and over time, the number of innovators, while straining institutions designed for population expansion. Working age populations are projected to fall sharply in many advanced economies, though unevenly. By 2050, Italy is projected to lose close to 30% of its working age population, and China around 25%. Switzerland's decline is more modest at 9%. So the support ratios, the number of workers per retiree, are therefore projected to fall across regions. But many infrastructure and service costs do not scale down smoothly with population, and so in shrinking regions, per capita costs rise. This creates a fiscal trap. Shrinking tax bases collide with rising pension and healthcare obligations. In Spain, for example, seniors contribute about 12% of tax revenue, but account for over 40% of government spending. Pay-as-you-go pensions are structurally dependent on demographic growth and become unstable under persistent sub-replacement fertility. But over time, labor scarcity may also shift bargaining power towards employees, especially in care-intensive professions like healthcare. Outcomes differ, however, by sector and by country, depending on labor market flexibility, union strength, and policy choices. The US, for instance, has a very flexible labor market, where France faces strong unions. Here, the case of Japan is also instructive. Despite a shrinking workforce, wages actually stayed flat for years, as higher participation, especially of women and seniors, and deflationary expectations offset the upwards pressure on salaries. Only after COVID-19 did wage growth accelerate. GDP per capita depends on hours worked and productivity per hour. With fewer working-aged people, total hours fall. There are possible offsets: longer working hours, but those are constrained by biology, social norms, union strength, and also they tend to have a limited numerical impact. Higher participation rates, which are already near ceilings in many advanced economies, but not among all groups in those advanced economies. And migration is mathematically insufficient to stabilize age structures and is also socially and to a certain extent politically constrained. So productivity growth becomes decisive, but to fully offset depopulation, it would need to be 2 to 4 times higher over the coming decades. So reform is unavoidable, but aging electorates make structural change politically hard. Younger cohorts may feel the social contract is weakening, yet often lack electoral weight to force adjustment. Depopulation, besides economic change, also causes profound social change. Family structures are shrinking precisely as caregiving burdens rise. Technology and the state can help, but they struggle to replicate the dense networks of reciprocity and of duty embedded in family life. Fertility is also shaped by social learning. When large families become rare, they become harder to imagine and are less likely to be chosen. Immigration may be economically necessary, but integration and assimilation capacities vary widely. Depopulation also will unfortunately not meaningfully relieve environmental pressures in the next few decades. Peak population arrives around mid-century, and by then global temperatures may be around 2 degrees or more above pre-industrial levels, and many regions will already face extreme heat. In addition, climate outcomes depend far more on consumption and carbon intensity of the economy rather than on the size of its population. So depopulation in itself is not a climate solution. So what can we do about all this? Government and economic actors, like private companies, face 2 broad strategies: mitigation, by trying to raise fertility and birth rates, and by adaptation, by redesigning life with fewer people. Many countries have tried pronatalist policies, tax breaks, parental leave, housing support, cash transfers, but put bluntly, the results have been less than exciting. Hungary is a stark example of this. It spends over 5% of its gross domestic product on family support. But birth rates increases have been modest and temporary, and crucially, they remain under replacement level. Countries with relatively high fertility share one feature, though. Childbearing retains strong collective meaning, even in the face of high cost. So that suggests that fertility resilience depends less on cash and more on whether having children retains social meaning. There's also mechanical constraint to mitigation. That's the age structure. As the population overall ages, there are fewer women in prime childbearing years, limiting any rebound. So broad-based recovery in aging societies is therefore unlikely. Adaptation, on the contrary, looks at how societies can function well with fewer people. And there are some key policy levers that I would like to discuss briefly here. First of all, extending labor participation by integrating women, older workers, and parts of the population that are currently not included in the workforce. The case of Japan, thank you. The case of Japan, again, is very illustrative. These measures can buy time, but they cannot indefinitely offset a shrinking population. Migration can supplement labor supply, limited by skills and integration capacity. Third, pension and fiscal reform, so restructuring systems to cope with collapsing support ratios by changing retirement ages, like was tried in France, for instance. Pension benefits and tax levels, that all is essential, but it faces strong political resistance. Continuous education with fewer workers, each worker's skills matter more. That means stronger education, including vocational education and better mid-career retraining as technology changes jobs. Countries that treat education as finished by age 18 or age 25 will struggle. Healthy aging or reducing the gap between lifespan and health span will enable longer productive lives. Healthcare systems need therefore to evolve from acute reactive models towards prevention, healthy aging, and chronic disease management. Productivity and technology become a central element of this as well. Automation and AI can offset labor scarcity, especially by amplifying the contributions of people in healthcare, education, and professional services, areas where pure automation has historically struggled. In a depopulating society, labor-saving technology is less a threat than a necessity. The key question, of course, is how to deploy it well. The three-phase life of education, work, and retirement also needs to evolve to a multi-phase life where learning, working, and resting occur throughout the whole life course and until an advanced age. And finally, the topic of today, inclusion. We need everyone who can contribute regardless of age, gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, and any other personal characteristic that we can think of. Now, there's many levers. Each lever has its limits, and none can succeed alone. Effective adaptation requires a menu of policy choices that need to be combined and adapted over time. And crucially, since none of this is easy, it needs political courage. Different countries and economic actors will need to develop different responses, shaped by their economic and geopolitical position, institutional capacity, history, and prevailing cultural norms. The challenge is redesigning government institutions, private sector companies, and the social contract for a world that is smaller and older, and where in the labor market, talent, productivity, and inclusion become central. Societies and companies that recognize this early and redesign institutions and policies accordingly may emerge more resilient. Those that delay, waiting for fertility to rebound, technology to rescue them, or future generations to absorb the cost, risk discovering that the window for adaptation does not remain open indefinitely. Paul Ehrlich's story that I told you at the beginning offers actually a reason for hope. As an entomologist, he had studied insects, and he looked at humans as if they were insects. But he was wrong. Humans are not insects, and I firmly believe that through our human adaptability, ingenuity, and problem-solving abilities, we will survive and we will thrive in this new age as well. And conferences like this one are a great step in that process. Thank you.
Paul, thank you so much for that. Now, we're talking a lot about different age groups, and there is one particular age bracket that I think we tend to overlook, that we tend to ignore. Now, your council has defined this as the young old. These are the people who are aged between 65 and 79. Now, if you're healthy, you're motivated, and you want to work, what place is there for you in the job market?
Yes. Unfortunately, today, and since some of the things that I'm proposing have not been implemented, this is a very difficult place to be if you're looking for a job. And I would say in some countries, actually, including, sorry to pounce on France again, but if you're 57 in France, trying to find a job related to your skill level might be very difficult. So we need to make those changes so that we can offer people who are in that age bracket and beyond, and who want to work and who have something to to contribute to society, we need to make it possible for them to be involved in that process. And it's very illustrative, actually. John Beard, who was the head of the WHO Decade of Healthy Aging program, tells this story that he had a talk with airline executives, and he was asking them about what is your strategy for older adults? How do you want to attract them and approach them? And their answer was something related to increasing the number of wheelchairs. This is mind-boggling. This is incredible. Because for too many people, and also people who manage large companies, their idea of older adults is people in wheelchairs or people who need wheelchairs. And we have this whole group that we just arbitrarily mentioned as between 65 and 79. But you have this whole group of people who have this tremendous experience, who can be incredibly valuable, and that we need to make sure that we integrate, that we include in our labor market as well.
And just one final point. I know there's something that you never put on your CV. What is that?
So personally, I've taken any dates out of my CV.
So young and 32. Okay, thank you so much, Pol. Thank you.
Thank you very much.